Thanks for joining for another episode of the TechSpective podcast. My guest this week is none other than Mr. Jack Daniel. So welcome, Jack.
Hey, good to be with you, Tony.
I'm sure you get this all the time, and I'm sure we've had this conversation before. But every time I mention, like in my house to my family, like, oh yeah, I'm going to be talking to Jack Daniel, there are the obligatory, whiskey. So.
Right. So my standard response to most things of that is, it is a name and a hobby too. Although I do tend to go up market. There are times when a glass of Jack Daniel's on the rocks is the right thing. Sometimes, but it was Dad's name, and my dad was named after my uncle's imaginary friend when he was a toddler. And in a century ago in East Texas, in and around Athens, Kearns area, nobody had heard of the Tennessee whiskey at the time. So it was irrelevant when Dad got the name. And when I got it, it was just Dad wanted the kid to be named after him. So I'm not a junior, but same first name. So it's not John, it's actually Jack. And it's a fairly boring story, other than I'm really named after my uncle's imaginary friend when he was a toddler.
I mean, that's actually, I think, a pretty good story, to be honest. I think it's a better story than being named after the whiskey, unless he actually from the Jack Daniel family.
Right. Yeah. So he supposedly had no heirs, or at least none officially. But yeah. Yep. So anyway, that's that, and that's me, and it is fun because between my beard and my height and that name, people tend to remember me. And I used to be bad with names, and I got old and my memory's garbage. So I struggle with people's names, and for some odd reason, people remember me. But anyway.
Well, it's a powerful combination. Seeing you in person, again, your beard, your height, if you happen to have the
top hat, yep.
Top hat. If you combine those things with the name Jack Daniel, it's really hard to remember to forget that.
Yeah. No matter how much you try, no matter how long you go to therapy,
So one of the things we kind of started to talk about is we are at what hopefully feels like the beginning of seeing the light at the end of the tunnel. And I've when it comes to COVID and the pandemic. And I've had a couple recent conversations on the podcast about that. It's obviously a popular topic. We are all vaccinated. The only person who in my family who is not fully vaccinated is my daughter, who just turned 15. And it's because the vaccine only just recently became available for that age range. So she's actually going for her second shot tomorrow. So cool. At that, we will all be fully vaccinated. But like you were just talking about, we're still being cautious. So the governor of Texas and his stupidity notwithstanding, I'm still wearing a mask when I go out. I'm still avoiding travel for the most part for now. I might actually have a trip to Boston coming up at the end of June. And I am planning on being at Black Hat in person. So the company I work for by day intends to have a presence there. And I believe there's 99% that I will be physically in Las Vegas.
Yeah, I can see that. One of the things about travel, I do miss travel because I used to travel a bit, and then I traveled more. And then after some changes in my life, after becoming a widower in late 2017, I lived on the road. I want to say it was over 300 nights, not in my own bed. And then it slowed down some, but it was running, and I enjoyed it. And I enjoy travel because it's not typical for me. It's not typical sales travel. I'm not in sales. I'm a community builder. That's what I do. And so I get to spend a little bit more time and, enjoy travel. It's not a rat race. But now I haven't been to London in a few years. I love London. I'm not a real fan of big cities, but I love that city. I really want to get back to Norway. I want to spend some time in Copenhagen when the weather's decent and not cold and miserable. There's a lot of things that I would like to do, but if you look at the news, people are being idiots on airplanes right now. They're just like, the other day I glanced at something online and there were 3 stories in a row about a pilot misbehaving. We'll leave it there. One airline, the tally of the number of people they've had to ban for not just not wearing masks, but becoming belligerent and starting fights. And then airlines saying, I don't think we're going to serve alcohol. We're not going to resume serving alcohol, or we're not going to serve it in the cheap seats because people are acting so bad. And I'm okay with them not serving alcohol on the airplanes, but the fact that they're doing it because people are acting so bad, let's let people remember how to be decent. But I do miss that. And, I've done some travel over the years with a compact RV, and that won't get me to London. So I'm going to have to get back on an airplane, but I'm not rushing into that. I will not be in Vegas for that, but I'm also older and I enjoy not being sick. It's just, B-Sides and Diana Initiative decided to go virtual. And I'm trying to step back from day-to-day ops on B-Sides Vegas, and the team is taken over and they don't need me for much. It's like, I'll be back in Vegas probably September maybe, but not for the big crowds. I'm not an introvert. Well, I'm sort of one of those introvert extroverts. I need to recharge in small groups, but I'm fine in large groups. But it's down on the coast of Georgia, and the past weekend we were like, oh, the traffic's terrible. We're packed with tourists, and we realized that we are coming out of this dark period because we decided we didn't want to go anywhere because people instead of COVID. So that's progress, right?
Yeah.
I just want to avoid the dumb mobs. But anyway, yeah, we've done some travel, and I think that there are things that we're going to see, and we're already seeing the companies that are pushing people to return to the office already. There's already a backlash on that, and there seems to be some really biased reporting and hot takes in both directions about the productivity of remote workers, and that's trying to talk about productivity during the past year is not fair to remote work from home, because I think Andy Ellis was the first one who put it this bluntly. He's like, nobody's working from home. We're working from crisis centers, especially if you have kids at home. And so trying to do that. Also, you look at the numbers of how much time and therefore money you saved by not commuting, by not traveling, by, eating at home instead of going out for lunch, the money saved. They talk about the things that people did while they're on the job. Well, it's, if your laptop's open 14 hours a day, your work laptop is open 14 hours a day, and you run out to pick up the curbside pickup for dinner, that's not detracting from what you've done. So people really got wound up about it, and people have taken sides, and I don't know, but I think a lot of people have now discovered how to efficiently work from home, and we'll see. It'll be interesting to see it shake out. It was interesting early on. I did a simple survey and got several hundred people to answer about how, particularly in cybersecurity, we were doing as an industry, and compared to a lot of other industries, very few people lost their jobs, very few people lost hours. And I was really surprised at how many companies did a good job of communicating in the early days. But it's worn on, and everybody's a little tired of it.
Well, true. And, I feel like, we went from, initially it was, hey, there's this thing we're all going to work from home. But I think almost every company viewed that as more of like a hurricane response kind of thing. Like, we're going to go home for 2 weeks and then we'll get back to normal. And so there was no long-term plan when they started. Right. And after a month, they started going, oh shit, this is going to, we're in this for the long haul. And then they had to kind of rethink the strategy. And then I think early on, there was a lot of, like you said, of saying, what, productivity is actually pretty good. Productivity has gone up. maybe this is a good thing, but to your point and to Andy's point, it's not necessarily a valid measure. I mean, I know Microsoft in particular has put like a couple different studies on, what they've, the metrics they've gathered over the last year. And I'm not saying that's worthless. I mean, it's okay to look at that data, but I agree that it's not a valid representation of work from home per se. So it's more like, as we move forward over the next year or over the next 2 years, then maybe you look at that data and say, okay, well, how does this measure up?
Yeah, and I would encourage people to look at the data themselves, because there've been some not good takes based off of that data. So dig back to the raw data, and there's stuff to be learned from that. But yeah, we learned. One of the only, and it wasn't bad, but it was the only not good area, and no one should be surprised by this. As far as that survey I did last year, was that people felt that managers weren't equipped and trained to do management of a remote workforce. They felt the management was unprepared and then not supported by the organizations. That was a minority opinion, but it was the largest of the negative opinions, was that managers, and that's a thing that we struggle with in every industry. It is certainly not unique to us. I mean, I ran into it in the car business when I was a mechanic. People get promoted into jobs that they're not competent for, and they get stuck there. And so we've promoted people, and we put managers who were maybe not, some of them were great, some were not. When I first migrated into management, I was terrible. It took me a while to realize how bad I was, and I worked on it. And I'm really glad I don't manage people anymore. I did my time, but we, have people that we've not taught how to hire. A whole nother topic. We have done a less than ideal job of teaching people how to be hiring managers. And so we have not enabled them to be a good manager of remote workforces. In some cases, in many cases, people figured it out. But yeah, it's been an interesting experience. Things are returning to normal, as people have said. Though, it doesn't have to go back to the way it was before. It's possible that we could make some changes and maybe even make things a little better about flexible working times and spaces, the amount of commuting, the amount of travel. I know that a lot of companies are looking at travel and thinking, well, it's kind of nice not spending however many trillions get spent annually on travel. It's like, that was nice to not have that. Maybe we should think a little bit more about how we spend. And I really believe in the power of face-to-face conversations, but a lot of business travel, I don't know. I think a fair amount of business travel could be rethought. Let's just put it that way.
Yeah. Well, and I agree that I think it's already a trite term, but I think we're going into the quote unquote new normal. It's, yes, we'll get back to normal-ish, but we have an opportunity to kind of redefine that a little bit about, well, what are we going to accept as normal? And I think most companies probably will. I mean, most of the companies I've talked to have said they are going to adopt some sort of hybrid model, or and be much more flexible about working from home, and have kind of like a hoteling kind of an arrangement where, like, you may not have an assigned desk, but there's someplace you can go if you want to go into work.
Right.
There's a conference room. You can book the conference room, but you're not required to be there.
Yeah, and it really depends on the role. I mean, the cooks at the restaurant you got takeout from, they have to show up in the kitchen, right? In our field, to pick on one that's an easy example, in support operations, when you bring new people into support, which for a lot of us is an interesting, is a viable way to get into the field, the new people in support need to be where they can put their heads together with more experienced people. Does it have to be every day of the week? I don't know, but you need to. I can see a pretty strong argument for support people when they first join an organization being somewhere where the resources readily available, managers can help them get up to speed, make sure that they're actually helping the customers. And then as you drift off, once you know your stuff, if you have internet connectivity and a telephone and a computer, and maybe not a telephone, depending on the level of support you're offering, you can do your job anywhere. And there's not everybody needs to be there. It's sales, as I mentioned, for travel. It is often easier to close deals, and in person. Sales engineering, the people that do the demos and proof of concepts and work with engineering teams to install and test systems, they kind of need to show up at the SOC to plug those boxes in or whatever they're doing to make sure it works. But do we need to do all of it? I don't know. And if you want to, I don't know. I would really like more thought to go into the amount of travel we do, because a lot of people travel extensively and hate it because it's just miserable. They want to be home, and it's like, maybe we should make people a little less miserable. Crazy talk, I know. Sorry for being idealistic. No one expects that from me.
I actually had, this is actually a battle I had when I was working in cybersecurity with EDS back in like 2003-4, because I went into the office. I had a desk at I had my cubicle at the office building. Initially, when I went home, it was because my internet connection was better than theirs. It was sort of one of those cases of the cobbler's children have no shoes, where we did infrastructure for other companies, but ours sucked, and I needed to get stuff done. And I was like, you know what, this is infuriating. I'm going home where I can actually connect to the internet, and then I just kept doing that.
Yeah. And if you are paid well enough or have been doing it long enough and built it up slowly, your home office starts to be a technology nest and really tuned to you, which even if you have an actual office where you are and the company doesn't skimp on the hardware that they give you, it never feels quite the same. Although, my previous gig, when I did go into an office, they were really cool. They were pretty good about it. But, I'm sitting here and I can switch gears. It's to switch gears to do this is no big deal, because I pull one arm down that's got a mic on it and drop one of the USB interfaces onto the desk, and I'm done. And then as soon as we're done here, I'm going to push this mic boom arm out of the way and get back to what I was doing, because it's not a disruption. It's not, my home workspace, and actually my mobile workspace, my rolling office, which can take me anywhere that roads go, is almost as efficient once I get it set up. And it's like, there we go. I'm happy here too. And at the end of the day, I'm closer to the tequila.
Yeah. Well, at some point, then someone new, some new exec came into EDS. I don't remember if it was I think it was like the CFO, and took a look at like the amount of money they were spending for rent, for leasing, and the amount of people that were working from home. And they were like, you know what, we're canceling all of the work from home agreements. We need people to be in the seats because we're paying for this space, and they were contractually obligated to pay for the space. And I had the argument at the time where I was like, all right, well, look, as it stands right now, I roll out of bed at 5, 6 in the morning. I jump on my computer. I'm there all day. Like you said, the laptop's open 14 hours a day. I'm literally sitting here working 14 to 16 hours a day. Now, am I full bore working the whole 16 hours? No. But when you make me come into work, and now I have an hour and a half commute there and an hour and a half commute home, and I have to actually get out of my pajamas and like shower and shave in the morning, so you got to tack on another half hour to an hour of prep time. And at that point, you're literally only going to get me from 8 to 5.
Right. And you're talking about a CFO who doesn't understand the sunk cost fallacy. Yep. You are now disqualified from your role.
At 5:01 p.m., when you say, Tony, can you? I'm going to say, let me stop you right there.
Right.
I'll see you at 8 in the morning.
Right. The CFOs who don't understand economics and don't understand social economics. That's the thing that often happens is not understanding the social economics.
Because okay, here's the other part of it too, is there, so there are managers, there are executives who feel like, well, if you're not sitting at your desk, then how do I know you're working or whatever? Like, I need you to be here 40 hours a week, physically present. And I would say, okay, but when I'm at my desk in a cube, there are so many more distractions than at home. I mean, I realize that varies depending on your home situation, but the guy in the next cube over wants to talk about, the football game, and this guy over here wants to talk about the news headlines, and then someone wants to, you're going out to lunch with coworkers, and all of these things. They're all interruptions, and where I felt like being physically present from 8 to 5. So that's 9 hours plus a lunch break, or minus a lunch break. So you got this full 8-hour day of being quote unquote at work. In my opinion, there was only 2 to 3 at best hours of productivity, of actually being able to get shit done.
Yep.
And at home, not only do I feel like because I have way more time and I don't have the commute and I don't have to, do all these other things, but then when I get up, instead of getting up to go have a meaningless conversation about the weekend's football game with a coworker, I can go throw the laundry in. I can go do the dishes. And those are things that when you go physically to work, they're still waiting for you when you get home. I mean, I just saw somebody post a thing, it was some kind of meme, going around on Facebook or Twitter about, we work 5 days a week so we can, have time to ourselves on the weekend, quote unquote. And they said, but nobody has time to yourself on the weekend. What you have on the weekend is the entire to-do list of all the things you couldn't do during the week that you now have to accomplish in 48 hours before you do it all over again.
Oh yeah. And like I said, there's some jobs, if you work in support and your shift is 8 to 5, you have to be on call at that point in time. If they need you in the office, I don't know, it varies. But, there are other things that, particularly in our field where a lot of us work globally, if you want me to work with the team in India or the team in Australia, or, even the teams in Germany or where, Western Europe, if I'm working from home, it's if the time and date meeting planner, figure out what time it is. And I'm like, all right, well, I'll leave my camera off because I'll be in my PJs, but I will happily join that meeting to make sure we hear that. Or, I'll do a presentation at 11 at night or 2 in the morning for somebody in Singapore, because all I have to do is roll out of bed or stay up, and pants optional if I'm sitting at my desk. And we can actually deal with schedule disruptions easier. I mean, for those of us who are lucky enough to have jobs that can do that. If you're the guy who's changing the oil in my car, he's not going to sit in his house in his jammies, right? That doesn't work for everyone. But for those of us, for people it does, it's like, it makes sense.
Well, that's actually one of the things that was sort of exposed by the pandemic is that sort of classist, we are somewhat privileged in the roles that we're in, that it was not a problem for me at all. I was already working from home, so all I had to do is do that more. And and I have the luxury of being able to make pretty good money sitting here at this desk in my office at home.
Right.
And you have all these people who are stocking grocery store shelves and making food at the restaurant and changing oil and fixing cars and all those things. They don't have that option and are woefully sort of underpaid and undervalued for what, and what's really, really disheartening is I feel like as we start to come out of this, people switched back so quickly. We went from raising them as heroes and frontline workers to under tipping them and being assholes at restaurants again in like a heartbeat.
Oh yeah, absolutely. As a former mechanic, the whole unskilled labor or semi-skilled labor is nonsense. It makes me crazy, and it's like being the people that are dismissive of people who can communicate well and are empathetic and can understand the perspective of other people, all being dismissed as, oh, those are just soft skills. We work in tech. It's like, well, you can't actually communicate, which is why, I have budget and you don't. So I don't know. We're dismissive of things, but that's one of those, I don't know, it's kind of human nature. Whatever it is we do is important and difficult, and everything that everybody else does isn't until you, or unless you are either empathetic by default or learn some empathy, because life kind of beats you up pretty hard, and you start looking around while you're being tromped on, and you think, oh, you know what? I'm not the only one who's being ground into the dust. Maybe I should be less of a jerk to the guy that mows the lawn, or the people that serve me food, or whatever it is. Yeah. And like you said, I think the people that are, no matter what your politics are, I think you and I line up pretty closely on a lot of things. I mean, my own personal politics are to the left of my own personal politics most of the time, if that makes sense. But the people that have taken this out on the poor folks that are just trying to do their jobs, the people that are taking a swing at the Walmart greeter who says, "Hey, welcome to Walmart. Please remember your mask." And do you think that person wants to stand at Walmart and say that? No. Just play along. Come on. But anyway, yeah, it'll be interesting. We have an opportunity to be nice, and I was really kind of disappointed the way a lot of things happened with this with the pandemic situation, because after the horrors of 9/11, those of us that have been around that long remember that for a while everybody, and it was, for some people it was forced. I'm not going to be naive about it, but a lot of people were a lot nicer. They were just like, oh, here, let me hold the door for you. Let me remember to say please and thank you.
There was a, at least briefly, a united front. It's the whatever partisan issues you had yesterday suddenly seemed meaningless because we were all in this together. And you would think that that a global pandemic would do the same thing, not only at least on a national level, if not a global level. But instead, we had people kind of dug their feet into their partisan trenches.
Yeah. The polarization is depressing. And I mean, that's another rabbit hole for in person, probably with strong drink. But the polarization is difficult, and it's something that pains me when I see polarization that starts to permeate day-to-day stuff, and permeates our own communities. If people choose to go to Black Hat because they need to, or DEF CON because they need or want to, that's cool. That's their decision. Hopefully they're fully vaccinated and they're going to be safe while traveling. There are some risks there. Adults should make those decisions. I won't be there, but that doesn't mean I'm judgmental of anyone who does choose to go, except I will be judgmental of the people that fake vaccination information and lie to the goons at DEF CON about being safe to be there. But, it's, you have to be like, different risk analysis. Although I do cling tightly to my title as the world's oldest millennial, chronologically, I am older than that. And that informs my my risk analysis of, what I do with travel and personal health and personal safety.
When the CDC relaxed the guidelines and said, hey, what if you're vaccinated, you don't need to wear a mask, and then the governor of Texas, said, okay, well, we're going to lift the mask mandate, and I'm going to go a step further and ban any cities or counties from imposing any mask mandates. Initially, I was like, well, what are you doing? Now all of a sudden, all the people who are not vaccinated can now just walk around and say they're vaccinated and not wear a mask. And someone pointed out to me, they said, yeah, but they're already doing that, so it didn't really change anything.
Right. And I think there's a certain amount of social engineering going on there, by saying, hey, we can relax, even as there are concerns about variants and other situations by saying if you're fully vaccinated, you can relax a lot with the masks and gatherings. It's an encouragement to be vaccinated.
Yeah.
I don't think it was communicated well, but unfortunately, a lot of this hasn't been communicated well. And luckily, miscommunication and poor risk analysis is not something that affects us in cybersecurity. Oh, wait.
I guess it is a related topic, but I know that one of the things that has for years been a cause of yours is kind of the stress and burnout and mental health within the cybersecurity industry, and it's I mean, not to say that it's totally unique amongst industries, but it is a tough industry. Like especially if you're an analyst in a SOC or whatever, like literally you're waking up every day to fight a battle that can't be won.
Right. And heaven forbid you're doing incident response. I mean, if you're in DFIR, it just grinds people up. I'm sitting here. There are 2 books on my desk right now. Harvard Business Review has a book on beating burnout. I also have one of the original titles on it from decades ago, which was The Truth About Burnout, which was Dr. Christina Maslach and Dr. Michael Leiter, who did the foundational work. There are some real challenges with burnout. First of all, if somebody is in a bad place mentally, whatever definition you want to do, and I say, do you feel burnt out? They're going to say yes. And we instantly know what that means. And on the other hand, there's a clinical definition that involves 3 key elements of depersonalization or cynicism, depending on the nature of your job, exhaustion, and personal efficacy. And so it's a word that we all understand, but some people feel burnt out that don't meet the clinical definition. And the clinical definition, interestingly, is usually misused because an individual diagnosis, if I said to you, hey, you meet the clinical definition of burned out, that's misusing the clinical diagnosis because it's actually about the environment. Dr. Maslach talks about pickles. And even if you like pickles, did the cucumber ask to be thrown in the brine? Right? No. What comes out is, even if you like pickles, who asked the cucumber? So it's the environment that makes that happen. And that's that's where even the World Health Organization has gotten this wrong. But there are some things that we can all understand. In our field, there haven't been any large-scale studies, but there have been small-scale studies that I think are informative, if not statistically provable or anything. I know of one that I was involved in was 127 respondents. I know of some others that were from a few dozen to several dozen. And there were some trends that seemed to be consistent. And one of them was that the cynicism is very high. And it's really easy to see why. I think that to be good at security, you need to be skeptical. You need to question things. You need to be questioning what you're told. You need to question why things are the way they are. You need to question whether or not this thing that you've just observed is appropriate or inappropriate, if it's malicious or benign. So you need a good dose of skepticism. And after you do it for a while, we're a cost center, not a profit center, generally speaking. And therefore, we tend to be underfunded. We are still battling the issue of being the Department of No instead of being enablers. So there are a whole bunch of things that make it easy to get pushed from a healthy dose of skepticism to an unhealthy level of cynicism. And, the workloads, the exhaustion is really a challenge. If you're in a situation that doesn't let you excel, you don't feel like you're personally effective. And that is a combination for really bad things. We also tend to work alone, working alone, not in teams. And even if we're in a team, it's, I don't know. I know that some aren't, but a lot of times teams are actually just a group of individual contributors. They're not really teams. And that isolation You know, when you're a kid, you couldn't go jump at the camp, whatever camp it was. You didn't jump into the pool or lake alone. You always had your buddy with you, right? It's things. The military, they make teams of certain sizes because we're hardwired. When things get ugly, the prefrontal cortex gets ignored by the amygdala, and that's the way you act. And certain unit sizes are how we work and how we take care of each other. And but we do this, and we all have an ego and feel that we're special. And all of these things kind of contribute to that. And it's great to see that, RSA and other conferences and other places are really starting to recognize it. I'd like to see a little more honest conversation about this, about the organizational structure, because as a manager, if you don't do whatever you can to take care of your people, you're going to have to do their job for them, and you're going to have to hire more people, which is a nightmare. That's a real challenge. And one of the things that I've seen a few times in our industry is, software in general, not just in security. We get on the venture capital round, and then we try to go IPO or acquisition, and on various points in that path, the organization behaves in ways which don't make sense unless you understand that your pre-IPO phase, filed but not yet IPO'd phase, immediate post-IPO phase, there's Wall Street logic. And you can put that in air quotes or scare quotes if you want, but Wall Street logic is different. And we don't train managers about what they're going through. And so a lot of managers don't train and explain to their people, because if you don't feel like you're in control, it's a real recipe for burnout. And if you aren't in control, but at least you understand what's going on, that helps a lot. It's like, oh, this really seems dumb. And for you and me, this is dumb, but here's what the Wall Street analysts look at, or here's what an equity partner looks at as they think about investing in us. This is what, Series C round, we need to look like this. There are things that we don't explain. There are things that a lot of us don't understand ourselves. And when we don't understand it, we get confused, we get angry, and none of that helps. And just talking about it, it's like, you don't have to dwell on it. As people often point out, we're not getting shot at, but we are grinding a lot of people up. So
first I want to jump back on one part when you were talking about kind of the clinical definition of burnout. It made me think of how society in general likes to co-opt terms. Like, somebody will say, maybe I just always have to tie my left shoe before my right shoe. And then someone will be like, oh, that's OCD. Well, it's like, no, you're just doing a quirky thing. You're not clinically OCD. Or people talk about being like on the spectrum and just kind of like casually dismiss that as, oh, he's on the spectrum. It's like, well, is he really? Or are you just kind of abusing the autism spectrum to make a point?
Right. We abuse those. And unfortunately, like I said, burnout has clinical definition, but also it's just instantly something that you can identify with, right? So it's not like naming a disease that is unique. If you say to somebody that you have, pick one. You have liver cancer. If you have a clear cell cancer of the liver, that's very specific, right? I hope nobody has that. That's really bad, by the way. But when you have a term that gets abused, and this happens with things like, oh, I have the flu. It's like, you know what? You're up and moving. You probably don't have a real flu. You probably have a bad cold. Because if you've had one of the real flus,
when I had the flu.
Yeah. But we say, it's cold and flu season. Let's not lump them together. And so these common terms add to confusion. And, again, it's not like we have, I've said this a few times. If you want to have some fun and then you'll start crying, it'll be like, the meme of the little boy that's being interviewed and he starts out smiling, and by the end of the 12-second clip, he's sobbing. Have fun by going around, I won't name it, but some big commercial vendor event in the vendor expo area, and ask the people that are screaming at you and trying to scan your badge and spam you to explain words like threat, risk, vulnerability, exploit in real world terms. Make it simple. You can oversimplify it and then we can tighten up from there, but just tell me, what's the difference between a threat and a risk and an exploit and a vulnerability?
So
how about mitigation? And you know, what you'll get will be nonsense and make you really unhappy. And then every now and then somebody's going to be like, all right, let me explain it to you in really simple terms, and we can elaborate from there. And you'll be like, okay, I wish I had budget because I'd buy from you for knowing what you're talking about.
Well, okay, so couple things there. Number one is, and I just talked about this recently on the podcast, but when, RSA last year was the last time the last actual event I went to before the pandemic. And I went there with a project in mind from a marketing perspective to walk the show floor and kind of make a top 20 list of buzzwords. And my goal was partially to just identify the buzzwords, but it was partially to basically kind of show like different companies that do totally different things are still using the same buzzwords. And that, like, if you go in there as a customer, as a non-security person trying to buy a product or understand what is out there product wise, RSA and Black Hat are not, the show floor is not the place to do that, because everyone's using the same buzzwords. And then I came back with that list so that in my capacity as a freelance writer and marketing consultant to companies, similar to the exercise you just described, I basically would go to companies that I'm working with and say, look, here are these 20 buzzwords. I need you to be able to explain to me what you do without using these buzzwords. Now, I understand why in your marketing and why, on your website, why you have to use the buzzwords. It's sort of like it's at some point it becomes table stakes, and you kind of can't not use them because everyone else is using them, and it looks bad if you don't. But at the very least, you should be able to tell me in English without these buzzwords what you do.
Yeah. Just what is it you do? What problem do you solve? Is another. It's like, I don't care what you do, but what problem do you solve? I don't know.
It starts off with, well, we do artificial intelligence and machine learning on the blockchain. Then I'm like, all right, well, right,
we're done. We're done. There are some, there's some real work that's being done in machine learning, in artificial intelligence, in human machine teaming, in things that make sense. And it's the screaming just overtakes all of the more rational stuff.
Right.
It's crazy. And you look at it and you think we still don't understand. The various biases and algorithms have been shown repeatedly. The abusability of machine learning and artificial intelligence has been shown. Artificial intelligence's struggles with natural language processing are, go back half a century almost now. So there are challenges there, but there are also people who say, there are things that machines can do quickly that you don't have to do. And we've figured out what some of those are. And now you can use your precious human resources. And I'm not saying that ironically, but the resources of people who know your systems and know your environment and know your space. Those resources, those people are precious to your organization, whether or not you treat them that way. And let's not waste their time. If you want to have a conversation about machine learning and artificial intelligence that starts with the premise of we're going to solve a problem for you without understanding what my problems are, you're wasting both of our time. But if you say that we do some cool stuff, and what it does is it reduces the amount of time your people waste on a project or on a problem. It's like, okay, let's talk, right? But that's not sexy. That's not as sexy as we solve it, right? You know, anybody that claims to solve something, you really kind of worry about, I think, unless it's a really simple problem.
Yeah. Well, so the other thing I was going to mention, which brings us back to the burnout side of this conversation, is, you know, there's this sort of bravado or badge of honor that people have about, you know, I have, you know, 8 hours of back-to-back-to-back meetings, you know, today, or, you know, I, you know, put in 70 hours this week, or it's been a year and a half since I took a vacation, as if that's supposed to be impressive, you know, like here I am, I'm such a dedicated worker. And I feel like that's ingrained at a very early age, because, you know, my kids, you know, when it's like, whether, you know, we homeschool, but, you know, like kids in public school, like they pass out awards for, like, well, you didn't miss a day of school, or, you know, or, you know, when my daughter dances, and the dance studio would, you know, not the one she's at now, but when she was younger, would give out awards for, you know, that at the end of the year, like, you didn't miss any class. And it's like, okay, yeah, but some of the people who got that award showed up to class like visibly sick.
Right. And are responsible for some of the other people not being there. Yeah. No, we tend to work really stupid. It is interesting that in some circles, it's starting to become a badge of honor and a bragging right for some executives. And I don't know that Silicon Valley it's penetrated there, but you hear people talking about the importance of getting a good night's rest. And, you know, back to something Andy Ellis said in a presentation, man, many years ago, to a small security user group in Boston, NASIG. He was talking about how Akamai did develop their incident response program, and they do at the time they did this thing where you couldn't be lead on the project for over a certain amount of time before you had to take a break, and then you could come back for a few more hours. And then you had to stand down. You couldn't be back on that incident response project for a certain number of hours. Like, I don't remember what it was, but at least 8. But they also built in communications so that one person leaving wouldn't break it. And that's not a small company, but it was designed so that, you know, if you've done system admin, if you've done the overnight nonsense, if you've slogged away at it, you've probably done that thing where you just give up, you know, 26 hours into fighting, you know, a melted down Exchange 5.5 instance, and you finally pass out on an uncomfortable couch in the office, and you wake up 4.5, 5 hours later. You got a little REM sleep, and you wake up, and the light bulb goes off. You're like, oh yeah, that happened 3 years ago. I'm going to go replace that DLL. Damn. Right. You let your brain work. The ability to sleep, the productivity you get, the productivity that falls off so fast after a certain number of hours. And, you know, it goes back to a whole bunch of things. But brain science we still know so little about the brain, and we know a lot, and it's amazing.
When I was, you know, much younger than I am today, and playing King's Quest on the computer. And I could not figure out what to do next. I got to a certain point, I just hit a wall, and I played it for like a week, didn't make any progress. And I finally just gave up. And like 2 weeks later, I just had this epiphany. My brain just said, wait a minute, you know, if you go over here, that's the solution. And it was, you know, so it's like subconsciously my brain was like still working on this problem for 2 weeks and managed to figure it out when I wasn't even focused on it. But the other thing I was going to say is, you know, there's a model that I think works so well. Like, my time in the Air Force was one of the nice things about it was I worked in a shop that was 24/7. You know, and a lot of my time I was on the like midnight to 7 a.m. shift, or, you know, I'd be on the 4 p.m. to midnight shift or whatever. But whatever I was working on didn't stop when my shift ended. Some other team came in and took over where you know, there was turnover. You know, you always gave turnover to the next shift. You said, hey, here's where I'm at. I'm working on this. I can't figure out why this thing is not working. And, there was notes that you would take and you'd pass it off to the next guy. So you'd come back 16 hours later and, figure out where it was. But at least it wasn't all on you and it wasn't waiting for you. And that extended to vacation, where like after Desert Storm, I was stationed in England. I hadn't been home for a while. I did Desert Shield and Desert Storm in Turkey. And after that, I had all this accrued vacation, and I was like, you know what, I'm going to go back. I'm going back to Detroit. And I took a month off, and went home and hung out in the States. And my work didn't pile up for a month. And, and meanwhile, I was just talking with a friend the other day on Tuesday after the 3-day weekend about like, well, hey, how was your weekend? And he was like, well, great, except for that, now I just have an extra day's worth of shit to cram into today.
Yeah. No, that's it. I mean, when I was a mechanic, I had a brain for diagnostics. I worked on some interesting vehicles, and I ended up being the diagnostic guy, and I got all of the ugly jobs, and that was when computers had only been cars for a few years, and it was a mess. And I learned then. I kept a notepad by the bed. I can't fix the car once I've driven home, right? I can't put my hands on it, but I wake up in the morning, or I'd wake up at 3 or 4 in the morning and be like, oh, I should check this, and scribble a note down. And I came up with those things after rest. I might have spent 9 or 10 hours in the shop, like just trying everything I could think of. And then I'd get some rest and like, oh, hey, why don't I try this? Yeah. And also, that team thing, if you're handing off a job, you're like, I'm fighting you. This is where I am on this project. It's going really well, except for this one thing. And somebody says, did you check this? Or have you done this? You're like, duh. It's like, all right, there we go. It's anyway. Yeah. Humans, we're weird.
Well, I wanted to start to wind down, but I wanted to point out kind of what a small world cybersecurity is. So like, you've mentioned Andy Ellis a couple of times. I just had Andy Ellis as a guest on the podcast like 2 weeks ago. The podcast episode that I released earlier today was with Wolf Gerlich, who mentions you in our podcast. He's telling a story and tells a story about when you were into blacksmithing, and a kind of presentation you gave, or a conversation that you had about that it's a unique piece, and you can't it's not a
the hand forged lock story. Yes.
Yeah. And then in the same sort of It's a Small World, I also recorded earlier this week an episode with Ron Gula, who we are familiar with. So it's just kind of funny how
Ron and I have known each other for, I don't know, probably almost 15 years now, and I went back and forth when I was at Astaro before joining Tenable, and we're like, hey, got anything open? And Ron's like, nothing good for you. And then Ron would ping me like, or Jack Hufford, his co-founder with Renault, be like, you should come work for us. And I'm like, I'm really happy where I am right now. And then one day, about 10 years ago, almost exactly, Ron said, we want to try a thing again. I'm like, yeah, let's do it. But yeah, no, I've known Ron. It's at a certain point, at a certain age, I think the younger folks, the industry has spread more. But we certainly have these connections.
Right.
I was on a social gathering the other night, and Josh Corman was there, and Weld Pond was there. Chris Weisopel. For those of us old enough, he's probably always going to be Weld Pond. But anyway, Chris Weisopel and Hobbit joined, and a couple other people. I'm like, wow, these are people. And, it's like I used to work, Ron had hired Marcus Ranum, and a lot of us know who that is. And you say Marcus Ranum to newer folks and they don't know him. But
when Wolf brought up the blacksmithing story, and he said, yeah, Jack Daniels told me this blacksmithing story. And my response to him was, I didn't know Jack Daniel did blacksmithing. If you tell me blacksmithing and cybersecurity, the first person I think of is Marcus Rainham.
Yeah, well, he's doing bladesmith stuff now, but yeah, there are others. There are a handful of people. We have to have we have to have our escapes. I saw a comic the other day somebody posted last week, which was how to become a gardener, and it was get a CS or get a PhD in CS, become a developer, go to work for one of the big houses, get burnt out, become a gardener.
Well, it's funny. My story with Tenable was actually very similar, and I was obviously there much shorter period than you are, and you're still there. But I had originally interviewed, 10 years ago, or at least 8 years ago, with John Brody for a specific role, and it just didn't work out. They wanted me to move up to Baltimore or whatever, and that didn't pan out. And I had another conversation later that didn't pan out because they wanted me to, give up everything I was doing on the side and only do that. And I was like, nah, I kind of like what I've built for myself. And it was the third time's a charm kind of thing where, an opportunity came along, and it was funny because I heard about the opportunity, and Ron happened to be in San Antonio at a presentation. And I already knew Ron as well, and so I contacted Ron and I said, hey, I'm thinking about this opening that you guys have at Tenable, and he was like, well, why don't you come over? We'll have dinner. So I made the 3.5 hour drive from Houston over to San Antonio to sit down with Ron and have some dinner and talk about the role, and we agreed that he was fine with me doing what I do on the side as long as I give Tenable the focus they deserve, during the week. Yep. And the rest is history.
Cool. Yeah. Yep. It wasn't dinner with me. It was Starbucks in Washington D.C. But we were both pressed for time at the time. But anyway, yeah. No, and that's one of those relationship building things. And I don't want to seem pessimistic, but it doesn't seem to be as easy to do that these days as it was 6, 8, 10 years ago or more. Things tend to move fast, but it's one of those reasons why you stay in touch with people, and it doesn't have to be mercenary. There are people that do networking to be mercenary, but the number of casual conversations that have led to interesting places that I've heard about that have happened at B-Sides are one of the reasons that I put all the effort I do into B-Sides, because the number of success stories from, I did this and, I met this person at this B-Sides, or I gave a talk at B-Sides that led to this project, which led to this job, so just staying in touch with people and knowing who's out there, and letting people know that you're doing cool stuff. That's always one of the things. It's like if you're invisible, and it's like, I say that casually, but if it's hard for you to be highly visible, then that is a hurdle for those of us that are happy to hop in front of a camera or microphone. It's a little different.
Right. All right. Well, I will. We'll wrap it up there. But I want to thank you for taking the time. It's been too long since we've had a chat.
Yeah, it's good talking to you again, and hopefully we'll start bumping into each other at events on the road again soon. Like I said, I won't be in Vegas for Black Hat DEF CON. I will be in Vegas later this year. The big goal is to make it to Frankie's 11th, 12th, 13th birthday party. It's early December. I assume they'll have a party. But smaller crowds, but we're getting back. Be safe, and good talking to you.
Yeah, I'll hold you to that. We can meet up at Frankie's and drink some rum infused drinks in them.
Sounds good.
All right, later.
Bye.
I appreciate you investing your time to listen to the podcast, but I also invite you to engage on social media. Please go like our Facebook page and follow at TechSpective on Twitter and Instagram. You can feel free to let me know what you like, let me know what you don't like, let me know if you love it, let me know if it sucks, and let me know what products you'd like to see reviewed or what questions that you'd like to see answered in future posts.